Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radical Democracy Podcast. I'm your host, Kamali Rose, and today we are going to be discussing what I am. This is episode 4 of the podcast, Make America Great Depression Again, as you'll see in the title. And what we're going to be talking about today is just the oncoming economic depression that we are going to be facing. Essentially, I believe that Congress has now paved the way for with their lack of response to this crisis is essentially setting the wheels in motion for what will be the greatest depression in U.S. history. And so I'd like to talk about that today. What I'd like to do is present you a series of stories that sort of lay out some economic indicators that are really things that should be alarming us. I'm going to bring in a lot of resources here, and we'll also hear from Richard Wolff at the end on to try to hopefully sum this up and contextualize this for us. So let us start by the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the recent news about the GDP. So let's get into it, okay? Here we go. So we recently got news about the recent every fiscal quarter, they release the GDP numbers, and that's our gross domestic product, which is the measure of the economic output of the country, how much we produce. It includes things, it's the formula for it, something like consumer spending plus manufactured goods plus services, rendered. So one thing to note is that about 70% of the US economy is based on consumer spending. Our economy is held afloat by people spending money. So because we've moved so much of our manufacturing overseas. And so we got the recent GDP numbers are in, and what they found is that the US economy the GDP has contracted by the GDP contraction is the worst contraction on record in US history, and it's by a lot. This article here is from NPR. It's titled 3 Months of Hell. US economy drops 32.9% in worst GDP report ever. This is from July 30th. And I'm just going to read a little bit from here. The coronavirus pandemic triggered the sharpest economic contraction in modern American history, the Commerce Department reported Thursday. Gross domestic product, the broadest measure of economic activity, shrank at an annual rate of 32.9% in the second quarter, as restaurants and retailers closed their doors in a desperate effort to slow the spread of the virus, which has killed more than 150,000 people in the U.S. Just note, U.S. has 5% of the world's population, yet we have over 25% of the world's COVID-19 cases and deaths. So we are number one. That's the U.S. Always leading the charge there. So the economic shock in April, May, and June was more than 3 times as sharp as the previous record, 10% in 1958, and nearly 4 times the worst quarter during the Great Recession. So we're talking about 4 times worse than the worst quarter during the 2008 housing crisis and Great Recession, and more than 3 times as sharp as the previous record on file, which was in 1958. Of course, this doesn't include. So that's the sharpest decline in history. It was in 1958, 10%, and those numbers are annualized. So that means that it's essentially projected out as what would happen if this rate continued on for a year. What would the rate be? The actual contraction was something like 10.5% or so. So just to put that in perspective, here's a graph that shows what that looks like. This is 50 years of GDP annualized. So these are all normalized to so that you're seeing, they're based on the same uh, formula for calculating this. And you can see, I mean, where you're seeing the black, those are quarters where the GDP increased. That's, what you typically want to see is GDP growth. There's this idea in capitalism of like infinite growth. We can always be growing and growing and growing. It just will never end. And so what you'll see here is that this is 50 years. And then look at the very end here. That red line that you see at the very end is just, it's essentially off the charts. I mean, the old charts just, they didn't show below 15% on the old charts. There was nothing below 10%. So, there no drop and no annualized GDP drop ever reached beyond 10%. And here we're talking about 32.9%. And so, I've seen articles, and I should have pulled one up from the New York Times, for instance, where they're really trying to sugarcoat these numbers, and they're warning you that, okay, don't pay too much attention to these numbers because this is a really unique circumstance, and so we should really be paying attention to this other number, the 10.5% number, because the economy only contracted by 10.5%. Dude, even 10.5%, if it wasn't even annualized, right, is worse than the worst annualized GDP drop on record. So what we're talking about, this is, I mean, you'll see some of the quotes from here. A quote from Nariman Baravesh, chief economist at IHS Markit, says, "Horrific. We've never seen anything quite like it." So yeah, so this is where we're at. Our the GDP is just a broad measure of our economic activity and doesn't tell the exact story on the ground for most Americans. Oftentimes our GDP will have GDP growth while still we have millions, over 500,000 people homeless and people struggling economically all across the country. So this isn't the only way that we should measure the economy, but it is something, and it is the indicator that capitalists love to use. And so this is their measures that we're basing this off of, and it's horrendous. What this shows is that what happened here is unprecedented, and we should be alarmed by these numbers, because what this means. And now, just keep this in mind as we continue on, because again, I'm going to try to link these through in some of these stories that I do today. Some of these will be cut into clips, and so if you're watching a clip of this, just check out some of the other clips, and you'll see. I'll try to put this into a playlist so you can see some of the other clips and hopefully see how this weaves together. So just keep this in mind as we continue on and as we talk, that this contraction is historic, and what we're talking about at this point is historic decline for the U.S. economy. So, okay. Next story up. Okay, let me pull up the next story for us. If you have any thoughts, please, leave comments, and I will try to respond as we go. I am on a bit of a time crunch today. Got a hard stop today at 1:30 Eastern time, so we got about an hour, a little bit more than an hour here to chat. So I'll do my best to get to comments, but I do want to try to get through all these stories, so I'm going to try to push through all the stories, and then we'll check out the comments and discuss afterward. Right? So next up. Sorry about that. All right. So for now, what is the second straight week, unemployment claims in the U.S. have risen. This is after 4 months of steady decline in the numbers. There were from the peak. Now, these numbers are still larger than anything we've seen in history, but it was declining. It was at least slowly declining for the past 4 months. But in the past 2 weeks now, 2 weeks straight, we've seen an increase in those unemployment numbers. So this is an article from CNBC and titled U.S. Weekly Jobless Claims Rise for a Second Straight Week, total 1.434 million people. That's 1.434 million people. They'll adjust this up to like 1.5 surely. The adjustments come later in the week. If you're ever interested in this, the weekly unemployment claims numbers are released every single Thursday in the US. So every Thursday in the morning sometime they release these numbers. And this is released by the Labor Department, the US Labor Department. So 1.434 million people filed unemployment claims. So that's 1.5 million new people filing for unemployment, which that number is increasing now. So we're seeing increase in unemployment numbers. We're seeing an increase also. This I don't have any figures on for you right now, but we're also seeing an increase in permanent job loss as well. So in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of the job loss, a lot of this unemployment was temporary. It's the kind of thing where workers were getting furloughed. People are essentially being told, okay, listen, you're going to have to go for now because we're shutting down, but we're going to keep you on payroll and we'll bring you back eventually. Some people you're essentially furloughed in a way, you're fired, but it's known that you're coming back to your job. And it's one of the questions that they ask you when you're unemployed. Is this a job? Is your job still available to you? Will you be returning to this job once the job opens back up? And so what we're finding is that more and more people are saying, no, that job's gone and it's gone for good. In fact, they said economists have estimated that about 50% of the jobs that have been lost in this economy are never coming back. So these are stark numbers that we're seeing here, and they're only getting worse. So just to read from this article, the number of Americans who filed new claims for unemployment benefits last week totaled 1.434 million, the Labor Department reported Thursday, roughly in line with expectations as the coronavirus pandemic continues to ravage the U.S. economy. It was the 19th straight week in which initial claims totaled at least 1 million. Now, just put this in perspective. During the Great Recession, the 2008 housing crisis, the peak at the height of the Great Recession, the jobless claims reached 625,000 a week. So what we're talking about, even at its lowest, we were still more than double the weekly unemployment claims of the worst point of the Great Recession, and we were more than double it for 19 straight weeks. 19 straight weeks, okay? So, I mean, we really need to put this stuff in perspective. What we're talking about here is unprecedented economic decline for the country. This is an unprecedented economic decline. So we have to keep this in mind. And it's become normalized now. And I've even seen this stuff like celebrated, like, oh, the numbers are decreasing. Yeah, they're decreasing, but they're still beyond anything we've experienced in the history of this country. So worse than the Great Depression. The Great Depression, we lost, I think they lost 30 million jobs, but it took 3 years to lose 30 million jobs. And during this time, it took about like 3 weeks or something like that. It's like, I'm off on those numbers. I apologize. I'm a little off on those numbers, but it was about 3 years versus about 3 to 6, about 6 weeks of time for, equaled out in this new Great Depression. What I believe once it has a chance to play out, I believe history will consider this the greatest depression in U.S. history. So, all right. So continuing claims, which are composed of those receiving unemployment benefits for at least 2 straight weeks, rose by 867,000 to 17 million for the week ending July 18th. They're saying there's still 17 million people that are on continuing claims, plus those are people that have been receiving for at least 2 straight weeks, and then there's been about 3 million more people added to that recently. So all right, so let's see. So these are what that means is that these unemployment, and hey, I'm on unemployment right now. I'm one of those unemployed people. So I've been unemployed. I've actually been unemployed since about August, the end of August last year. My unemployment wasn't due to COVID-19. Different story for a different day, but it has only been exacerbated by it, of course. And luckily, through some of the pandemic unemployment assistance, I have been able to. It's kept me surviving. It's enough for me to at least pay rent and buy food and get through. Even enough to pay off some of my debts that were just lingering and looming. So these are really stark numbers, and we really have to keep this in context and just recognize that these numbers are beyond anything in history, and it's been consistently happening for 19 straight weeks. We're seeing numbers beyond the worst of the Great Recession. For 19 straight weeks, what we're talking about here, it hasn't caught up with people, but this is dire. This is very dire, and we'll hear more from professional economists later on in this, that hopefully will give you an idea of just how stark this is. All right, so with that, and just know that these are just the unemployment claims. There are a lot more people that are becoming unemployed. You'll see. I mean, the unemployment offices have been completely overwhelmed. Lines out the door. People in certain states are having to show up overnight, camp out overnight in their cars just to get a ticket to hopefully be seen that day. And so there are many more people that are unemployed and unable to actually get onto unemployment. So these numbers are the absolute minimum of how many people are actually unemployed at this point. So just keep that in mind as well, that it's actually worse than what it looks like here. All right. Okay, moving on. Next story. I'll just quickly check for comments. Thanatos says that graph is ridiculous. Yes, I agree, Thanatos. That graph is absolutely ridiculous and should be shocking. These things should shock us. And I just want to, hopefully bring this to our attention so that we can, keep this in mind and build up the tools in your own tool belt so that you can notice these things whenever they occur, and hopefully you're and I'm sure folks that are watching this, you follow along, you pay attention to this stuff, and you're concerned about this, or else you wouldn't be watching. So that being said, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please do me a favor. I see that we have more people viewing than we have likes. Just do me a favor, hit that like button, and if you'd like to, please subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications so you know whenever we're going live like this. And if you can, if you can afford it, if you check out the description box, I have a link to my Patreon, and I would really greatly appreciate it if you can spare a few dollars a month to support this podcast and to keep this thing going. Please do me that favor. It's patreon.com/radical democracy. So please go there, just drop me a few bucks. It is so greatly appreciated, and it will keep this thing going. If you can't do that, at the very least, please do me a favor and just hit that like button and subscribe. I really appreciate it. What it does, it just gets it appeases the YouTube gods and the YouTube algorithm, and it helps to get more people viewing the stream. So they'll put it into more people's feeds the more likes and views that it has. So please do me a favor. Not just that, but also, if you can, hit that share button and share this on your social media. Share it with any friends that you know also are interested in these kind of topics. It really goes a long way, and I greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much for being here. And yeah, let's keep this going, folks. Please, and I love your comments. So please comment if you're here and you have a thought, anything you want to comment. I'll read all the comments out that I can. So please chat with me. I love it. Love going back and forth. So would love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on these topics, please, or any other topics that you'd like to discuss, anything that I missed, or that you see, if I'm incorrect about anything, please call me out on it. I greatly appreciate it. So thank you for being here. Okay, next topic. Let's get to it. All right, give me 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. Things still weird, still trying to manage it, still new to the game. All right. Oh. Apologize for all the ads you're going to see on this page here. I couldn't block these ads, so sorry about that. All right. So, uh, the $600 federal pandemic unemployment compensation, that was the $600 additional weekly unemployment benefit that was being given to every person that was in every state that was filing and receiving unemployment, has ended. And it ended on July 25th for most people, and for 49 states, and then on July 26th for New York. So that's gone. That's over. And what that means is that folks on unemployment now are, and there's about 30 million of them, are now receiving $2,400 less a month. That was more than half of what most people were receiving. So you're talking about cutting most people's incomes in half. And I'd just like you to remember, connecting this to our GDP and the GDP contraction. Just keep in mind that 70% of the US economy is consumer spending. So 70% of our economy is dependent on consumers having money. Okay? So let's just keep that in mind. So, just reading from this article. This is an article from USA Today, published on July 31st. And it's titled, Congress Leaves Town Without a Coronavirus Stimulus Deal, Allowing $600 Unemployment Benefit to End. Yeah, so just note, Senate has left town. They're gone. They left on Friday. And they're, I believe, on recess now. I'll check. It's probably going to be mentioned in here. But they knew this was coming. They knew that this fiscal cliff was coming. They've known it since the beginning of the pandemic. They put this deadline in place. So just note that they knew this was coming, and they waited until the week before these benefits ended to start negotiating the next stimulus package, which they couldn't come to a conclusion on, and just left town without one. So let's read from this. This is from the USA Today article. A $600 weekly unemployment benefit that has helped millions of Americans stay afloat amid the coronavirus pandemic officially ended at midnight as Congress adjourned for the weekend without coming to any deal on the program or a larger emergency stimulus package. The discussions over another package turned testy Friday as Democrats and Republicans each blamed the other for their inability to come to an agreement, leaving out-of-work Americans in limbo as the vital benefits came to a halt. In dueling press conferences, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows laid into Democrats for rejecting a short-term deal to continue the bolstered unemployment benefit for 1 week, while House Speaker Nancy Pelosi railed against Republicans in the Trump administration for attempting to take a piecemeal approach to helping Americans as COVID-19 cases continue to surge nationally. All right, so when you can see more of the back and forth, Republicans blaming Democrats, Democrats blaming Republicans. Here it is. What we're seeing is politics as usual from Democrats up on Capitol Hill, Meadows said from the White House podium. The Democrats believe that they have all the cards on their side, and they're willing to play those cards at the expense of those that are hurting. Pelosi criticized Republicans for waiting months before attempting to take up another emergency package, noting the surge of coronavirus cases and high unemployment rate. So what you see is, you're seeing a lot of, hammering just back and forth, one blaming the other. Now, what Pelosi said here, I'm no fan of Pelosi, but what she says here is actually true. They do deserve criticism for waiting months, but the Democrats waited months too. They didn't push this issue. Where were they? Where did you hear them screaming from the rooftop? Of course, they passed this thing called the HEROES Act, I believe it was called, and it had, it did propose extending the unemployment benefits, the $600 a week payment for 6 months. So they did pass that in the House, and then it got rejected in the Senate. It wasn't passed through the Senate. And so they that was their little effort to do that. Now they could have and should have gone a lot further in that. What they could have done was establish a universal basic income and provide every single person, because why are we just concerned about the unemployed? There's a whole bunch of people that aren't unemployed. They don't have jobs, but they aren't considered unemployed because of the way that we measure, or determine somebody's unemployment status in this country. It's really, are you still actively looking for work? There's a lot of people out there that if a job became available to them and was made available to them, they would gladly take it, but they've given up hope on it because they've been searching so long, and they've just simply given up hope. And so they're not counted on the unemployment rolls. So there are a lot more people though, the homeless and other people that are just don't qualify for unemployment, that need help as well. The elderly as well. They need they're on the fixed income, but things have gotten considerably worse, and it's much harder. Expenses are going to raise, because you need all kinds of extra care and help and those sorts of things. So this is, what we're talking about with this unemployment benefit. Sure, that's great for people like me that qualify for unemployment, but there's a whole bunch of other people that are being completely ignored in this, and they are some of the worst off people in the country who need the help the most, and they're being completely ignored by both the Democrats and the Republicans. So just keep that in mind, and don't, sure, the Democrats are a little bit better on this issue, but one, they're weak and they haven't done a damn thing to fight for this the way that they could. Now, right now in this moment, it appears that they are correctly using leverage. But if they do not successfully leverage what they're doing and extend that $600 benefit, if that's not the end result of this, then this was a total failure, and they should have taken that 1 week $600 unemployment extension. Because if the end result of this is that no extension happens, or just some weekend lesser extension happens, well, then what they did was just lose 1 week of that, one more week of people staying afloat for all people, that for about 30 million Americans. So it's just something to keep in mind. I want to bring in also a clip. This is just a clip of Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, who was a former Goldman Sachs executive, who Trump brought into his administration. So all those people that think that Trump is anti-establishment, what a joke. This dude is a standard. He came in and he just did the standard Republican nonsense, tax cuts for the wealthy, cuttings, social programs for the poor, and Wall Street, execs up and down his administration. He used to have Stephen Cohn, who left as soon as he got the $6 trillion tax cuts for the rich bill passed. As soon as that was passed, Stephen Cohn left. But you still got folks like Steven Mnuchin, who was one of the few people that was actually personally named in the 2008 housing crisis as being responsible for that housing crisis. And just note, since Kamala Harris is up in talks about being Joe Biden's VP, I care less and less about electoral politics every day. But just keep in mind that she had the ability as the Attorney General of California to prosecute Steven Mnuchin, but chose not to. Shortly after he made a $5,000, the max donation to her political campaign, she just suddenly chose not to prosecute one of the handful of people who was named as being directly responsible for the suffering of millions of Americans, the violent act of evicting a person from their home and forcing them into destitution. For that, this man got rewarded with being the Secretary of the Treasury, because of course a monster like that deserves to be in control of all the, financial policy, fiscal policy in the US. That makes perfect sense. So here is Steven Mnuchin talking about what he, and let me just make sure that I got audio playing here. Okay, yes. So hopefully you should be able to hear this audio. Let me do a quick double check just to make sure you're going to be able to hear this before I do it. Nope, you wouldn't. Okay, just fixing that up for us. Sorry about that. 1 second. Okay, so you should be able to hear this now. And let's just hear, this is a clip of Steven Mnuchin speaking to, I forget who is here interviewing him. Martha Raddatz on ABC. And this is what he says. This is how he feels about the $600 unemployment benefits. This is what he believes.
Offer was $200, not the $600 people have been receiving. That's a huge cut for people with mortgages and rent payments and trying to feed their families.
Well, there was a $600 offer for 1 week. I'm not going to make public comments, but Mark Meadows and I have made 3 or 4 different offers that deal with the enhanced unemployment. I think, as you said, Steny Hoyer and others understand that unemployment is supposed to be wage replacement, so it should be tied to some percentage of wages. The fact that we had a flat number was only an issue of an emergency where we had 30-year-old computer systems. So I think on the concept, we absolutely agree on enhanced unemployment. We want to fix the issue where in some cases people are overpaid, and we want to make sure there's the right incentives. But again, let me just emphasize, we put on the table a proposal. Let's extend it for 1 week at the same rate while we negotiate so we don't hurt the American public.
So you do think it is a disincentive to find a job if you have that extra $600?
There's no question in certain cases where we're paying people more to work, stay home than to work, that's created issues in the entire economy. But let me just say, you have to look at all these things.
I want to interrupt you there for just 1 second. It's not all the evidence. A Yale study from this month refutes that, saying many economists who have studied the benefits said that so far they don't see any evidence in labor market data that the payments are affecting the rate at which people are returning to work during the pandemic.
Well, let me just say I went to Yale. I agree on
that.
certain things. I don't always agree. There's a Chicago study that goes through all the people that are overpaid. But let's just face it, we know factually, okay? There are cases where people are overpaid. There are cases where people are underpaid. The issue is we need to come up with an agreement to extend this. We need to get kids into school. And we're going to work every day until we reach a reasonable agreement that's good for the American public.
Offer was
Okay, so that was there's a lot to unpack there. I saw a couple great comments pop up, so I'm just going to read a couple comments because I totally agree with them, and so I just need to, and these were my thoughts, so I'll just read it through the comments because these are my thoughts exactly. So these are from Thanatos, who says, flat rate only in case of emergency, ? Are we not still in a pandemic? Exactly. I mean, come on, you know, he said the $600 flat rate was only because we're in the case of emergency. Well, and let me just, hold on. Let's back here. So, no, you know what? Let's pull that back up. So, yeah, so he says, $600 only in, that flat rate was only in case of emergency. Well, are we not still in an emergency? Did we not just see that the unemployment numbers are increasing now? That, and we'll see a story soon about the COVID-19 cases as well. So we're still in the midst of a pandemic. Things haven't improved here. They're actually getting worse across the board. So why would the flat rate change? Why would we need to change that? He also mentions, and this is something else and let me just read this comment by Thanatos again, who says, 30-year-old computer system, LOL. Exactly. Something else that he noted there was that, that was because we had 30-year-old computer systems. Well, guess what? They still have 30, and now they have 30-and-a-half-year-old computer systems. You see, the computer systems haven't been updated. And in fact, states have come out when they said this, because what Republicans are suggesting is to do something like 70% wage replacement. And the problem with that is that a lot of these 30-and-a-half-year-old computer systems can't handle that sort of calculation. They're not geared up for that. And so these people don't even, these states have no idea, and they're scrambling now to try to figure out how they would even implement something like that. So, there's not even a guarantee that that's possible. And what's going to happen is that that's just going to put strain and stress on the unemployment system and just lead to more people who need unemployment benefits not receiving them. I could tell you a really crazy story about my unemployment benefits that happened recently. Maybe I'll share that anecdotally so that you can see some of the mess that people deal with, because it's messy. And so, yeah, this idea that we have, because there's that all of a sudden, the suggestion that he also says in there that we're overpaying people, and it disincentivizes people to work, as if the reason that people aren't going back to work right now is just because they're getting paid a little bit more. Now, mind you, this suggestion that, people are being paid more than what they were receiving when they were working. Well, did we ever look and question whether people were even receiving enough when they were working? Were they receiving a living wage when they were working before? Because it seems like that might be the bigger issue there. Not that they're receiving more shouldn't be the issue, but the fact that they were receiving less before should be a much bigger issue. Why is it that we can afford to pay people in this way, but companies couldn't afford to pay these people a living wage? Maybe there's an issue with capitalism there. Maybe that's what we need to pay attention to. So, then it also says the idea that unemployment benefits need to need to be wage replacements when we don't even pay some people livable wages. Shaking my head. So yes, same thing that I mentioned there. I just want to throw out another quote, another comment from What Up America. What up? By the way, always glad to see you here. Thanks so much for being here. Love. Oh, shoot, that reminds me too. I got to do the logo thing. So sorry about that. I'm not ready. I'm not geared up for it today. I'll do it on the next stream. So sorry about that. What up? I really apologize. I should have had that together. I was in a little bit of a rush today to get this stream together because I have a hard stop at 1:30. So I apologize for that. I'll definitely have that ready for the next stream. So What Up America says, it seems like a no-brainer to just have the government pay payroll to businesses to not fire their employees. This is labor force suicide. Such a great point. And I wish our buddy Ben 2K from Germany was here right now because he could attest to this. At the beginning of the pandemic, the US had about a 5% unemployment rate. So did Germany. At the peak of this, our unemployment rate, official unemployment rate, reached 15%. The unofficial employment rate reached over 20%, according to many economists, not, Marxist economists. These were capitalist economists saying that the unofficial unemployment rate was much higher and was much likely well over 20%. So mind you, Great Depression rate was at its height was 25%. So I'm guessing we've already passed that. We've already surpassed that in unofficial unemployment numbers. So just also something to keep in mind. But at the beginning of this, at the pandemic, Germany had a 5% unemployment rate. Now they have a 6% unemployment rate. Why is that? Germany implemented a policy where they said to all companies, listen, as long as you don't fire any of your employees, we will do a wage replacement. 80% they did, I believe. I believe a full wage replacement would be great and should be done. But, they at least did 80% wage replacement. And so, yeah, they just said, listen, you don't fire your employees and we'll handle it. We'll take care of it. So you don't have to do it through unemployment. You do it through keeping people employed. You keep them in their jobs. And you also make sure that these payrolls still get paid out. And so that would have been the simplest, most straightforward approach to if your idea is keep people employed. Now, I'm not totally in favor of that. I believe more in a universal basic income because I don't think that we should be forced and tied into our jobs and be forced into work. So I'm more in favor of a universal basic income. I also think that we should be helping people that aren't employed for whatever reason. There are many reasons, many legitimate reasons. People don't just stay unemployed because they're lazy bums. They're unemployed because of many different situations, many different factors play into that. But the average person wants to work. You sit around unemployed for too long and it's boring, it's dull. You want to get out there. You're isolated. You want to be around people. You want to get out there and contribute to your society. You want to do your part to feel like you're a part of society. Otherwise, it weighs on your mental health. I'm speaking from experience. You feel worthless when you're unemployed because of the dynamic that we've set up in our society and in capitalist societies to say that ties your human value, the value of a person, to the value of their job, to how much they get paid. It's like one of the first questions. Hey, what do you do for work? It's one of the first questions we ask when we meet somebody. It's baked into our brains at this point. And so the average person wants to work. It makes me recall an article that was written about 90 years ago by one of the people that are considered one of the fathers of economics, John Maynard Keynes. He wrote an article that he tried to estimate what work would be like in 100 years from then. This was published in 1930, so 100 years from then would be 10 years from now, 2030. And he imagined that by then, because capitalism, this is somebody who loved capitalism, he said, because of all the technological advances, as we technologically advance, we'll be able to output to produce the same amount while working less hours. So he said that by 2030, he expected that the average person would work 15 hours a week maximum. That would be considered full-time work, would be 15 hours a week. And that would be just to satisfy what he called the atom inside of us, which is like that urge we have to work because we've built this into people. We've created this. And honestly, I think that, just generally speaking, people want to do enough to know that they are doing enough to survive, plant the food that you need, whatever it takes to survive. So that's just something, it just, invokes that it just reminds me of that when seeing this. So there were easy ways to avoid the economic situation that we're in. Congress could have done it very early on, could have stepped in and just done wage replacement, full 100% wage replacement, or implement a universal basic income, which I believe would be the better solution, and just provide that to every person. You have Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk, great show. If you don't watch it already, I doubt you're here if you don't watch that. But if you don't watch it, check it out on YouTube. Secular Talk. Kyle Kalinske is great. One of the influences for this show, to be honest. So Ben 2K is here. Oh, that's awesome. Ben 2K is here from Germany. We were talking about you earlier, Ben 2K. So if you rewind back a bit, you'll see that we just talked about you actually. Ben 2K says, "Oh hey, just got the notification and I don't know how much time I've got to watch. Missed a lot in the last few days." Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, Ben 2K. If you rewind back like 5 minutes, 10 minutes max, and watch from there, you'll see that I just gave you a shout out. So we were talking about Germany and the unemployment rate and the difference between the economic stimulus from the German government versus the economic stimulus from the U.S. government, and just the wage replacement that they did and how effective it was in maintaining the unemployment rate, keeping it very low. So I know the German unemployment rate at the beginning of the pandemic was 5% and now is only 6%, and ours has tripled over that time. So kudos to shout out to a much more left-wing social democratic government doing what is necessary to help the people in need. So awesome. So Ben 2K says he'll watch live and check back later. Awesome. Yes, you definitely got a shout out, Ben. Appreciate you being here. So, this is really startling numbers, and we just have to really, again, keep this all in mind with all those other economic indicators and try to see what this is warning us of, what this is foreshadowing for the oncoming, economic crisis that we're going to be facing. And so I think we're going to move on to the next story here. Ben 2K says, I'm going to pronounce this terribly. I'm sorry, Ben. But Ben 2K says, Kuzar bait is a thing. Can you tell me more about what Kuzar bait is? I'm going to Google it real quick. But Kurzar bait is Germany's short-time work benefit. Okay, short-time working or short-time is state-regulated system of work-sharing unemployment insurance in which civilian employees agree to or are forced to accept a reduction in working time and pay. Okay, so Kurzar bait. Okay. Employers reduce their employees' working hours. And okay, so Kurzarbeit is a social insurance program whereby employers reduce their employees' working hours instead of laying them off. See, so they do everything they can to actually, save these people their jobs. And why? Because Germany has really, really strong labor unions that can fight for things like this. If we had a strong left-wing movement, if we had strong labor unions in this country, at the peak of the labor movement in this country, 30% of all Americans were a part of a labor union. At this point, only 10% are, and the majority of those are public employees. So, private companies just, it's very hard. They fight, they are anti-union, they do union busting, and that happens all over the place. I mean, even people that I'm a fan of, even companies that I'm really a fan of, folks like TYT have been known to be doing some union busting. So shout out to TYT. I love the channel. They part of the reason why I got to this point. But even folks like that aren't immune to it. If your company is structured as a capitalist company, it's not immune to it, particularly when, and even having strong labor unions in a place like Germany, the reality is, as long as you leave capitalists in place, and this is a warning to Germany as well, you leave those capitalists in place, and eventually they will fight, they will scrape, they will claw to do everything they can to regain political power and to alter those things so that eventually they weaken the labor unions and then weaken the public policy and implement their exploitative practices. So this is why we need, radical democracy, socialism, democracy in the workplace. So that's what I advocate for. All right, so let's move on to the next story. And so just note again that the $600 payment has ended, and it appears that Congress is still sitting on their hands. So just wanted to point that out. All right, give me a sec. I'll check out the comments and then we will move over to the next story. Ben 2K says, it's not left-wing by any means, though Sanders would be straight in the middle, if not conservative in Germany. Oh, such a great point. Thank you, Ben 2K. I apologize. What we're talking about here, these things, what they're doing in Germany, globally, what we considered left-wing in this country, globally, is centrist. Like, these are centrist ideas. Social democracy is a centrist idea. Thank you so much for pointing that out. This isn't considered left-wing. What they're doing there isn't even left-wing. It's just centrist. What we have here is just some vile right-wing policies that have, corroded our politics. And now, what we think is left-wing is really just globally centrist. So we just need to catch up to where the rest of the world is all we're begging for here in the U.S. Ben 2K says, we got capitalism as well, but we as well got really strong social safety nets. Exactly. That's social democracy right there. Capitalist system, but with really strong social safety nets, things like, i.e., or e.g. the Scandinavian countries, Germany, I think France is a good example of it. Just good social democratic governments. So these things this isn't, news to anyone. And a lot of these ideas, like, again, globally centrist. In the US, this would be considered far left radical ideas here, just to give people the basic safety net they need. All right, so we're going to move on to the next story here. But before we do, please do me a favor. If you haven't already, do me a favor and hit that like button below. If you're watching this on your phone or mobile, you just got to close out the chat really quickly, then hit the like button, and then you can just hit the live chat button again to open the chat back up. And please chat, drop some comments. Love hearing from you folks. So, we'll continue to read the comments through and engage with those. So, but do me a favor, hit that like button. If you can't, subscribe. And if you can, please do me an even bigger favor. And this means a lot. If you open up the description box below, you'll see a link to my Patreon account there. It's patreon.com/radicaldemocracy. And if you can spare it, please do me a favor and just check it out and just go there and drop me a few bucks. You just pledge a few dollars a month to keep the show going and hopefully grow it. I want to build a democratic workplace. I'm working on another project with a couple buddies of mine called Raised Fist Media, and we're going to be building that into a democratic workplace. So I believe in workplace democracy, and I really want to make it happen. I believe it's the way that we can actually overthrow capitalism, is by doing it from the bottom up, grassroots folks like us just supporting each other. And so if you can afford it, I'm begging you here, check out the Patreon, and you just go to the Patreon, patreon.com/radicaldemocracy, and throw me a few bucks. If my lowest tier right now is $3 a month. If that's too much, let me know, and I'll drop it down to $1 a month. I don't know if you can just pledge whatever, but like I'm almost definitely gonna drop it down to $1 a month. The reason that I haven't already, the Patreon system is kind of like, the lower the amount that you pledge, if it's less than $3, they take more of a percentage. They take 5% for anything $3 or less. Anything more than $3, they only take 2.9%. So the higher you go, it's like they take less money away from you for themselves. So like I'll get more of the money. So, and again, it's just this right now. I'm surviving on unemployment. At the end of the year, that's going to run out, and then I'm going to have to go back to working in software engineering, where I hate it and it's terrible. And I'm working to take people's jobs away, building software to take jobs away. And I hate doing it, and I would love to never have to go back to it. So I really would appreciate it if you can drop me a few bucks. If it's too much, let me know. If $3 a month is too much, I'm almost definitely going to drop it down to $1, but then encourage people to try, if they can, to do more than $3, so that they take less. So I'm sorry that they do it that way. I think that's absolutely backwards, and they should take less when you give less money. So I hate it. It's antithetical to what I believe. I apologize that it has to be that way, but thank you so much for being here and supporting. It means so much, and we're going to do this all together, and I hope to bring in your voices from the community as well. If you have stories that you want me to cover, anything like that. For patrons, I'm going to be like, if you have any questions, I'll take patron questions and do whole segments on them. And so we'll really be more interactive. So please, if you can, patreon.com/radicaldemocracy. It means so much. And it's just a social proof as well to other folks, like, hey, this thing is worth supporting. So I have only got one subscriber, one Patreon subscriber. I would love to get to 3 by the end of the week. If I can get to 3, if I can get 2 more Patreon subscribers, it will mean the world to me. So if you can afford it, only if you can afford it, please. If you cannot afford it, do not do it. I don't want you struggling anymore, on account of me. So, okay, Ben says he did it. Thank you so much, Ben2K. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So new Patreon subscriber, Ben2K, shout out. Thank you so much, dude. I can't thank you enough. That means so much. I deeply appreciate it. Don't worry, if you can't do more than $3 a month, like, listen, I'm gonna drop it down. If you need to do less, Ben, like, just send me a message, anything, like, let me know. I'll drop it less. Like, I don't want to be, putting any kind of strain on anyone. So I can definitely drop it less. Thank you so much, Ben. That means so much. I appreciate that. I can't thank you enough. You don't even know. The other subscriber, I'll be real, is my girlfriend. So, you are truly the first real, other, but she's my number one supporter. So I really appreciate her too. Okay, my girlfriend says I should tattoo your username on my body for being my first Patreon subscriber. So I don't know if I'm that bold, but we'll see about that. All right, we'll see about that one. So thank you so much, Ben. Ben says I did it. Huge smiley face, but I can't do more than $3 a month right now. It's more euros than that. So thank you so much, Ben. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate it. And to anyone else that's able to do it, I will be shouting out all of anyone that subscribes on Patreon will get a huge shout out from me, and I'll find a way to make it up into just really thank you just to convey my gratitude. So it means so much, and it really helps the channel to grow and just stay alive. So thank you so much. All right, let's move on to the next story because we only got about 30 minutes left, and I really want to get through the rest of these stories. So I'm really hoping I can. Maybe I can push it to like 1:35 or so. So 30 more minutes. We're gonna try to push it because we got a new subscriber. So thanks, Ben. All right, moving on to the next story, folks. Let's see. Second here. So this one, okay, the next story, I'm going to do this quickly because this is a story that I've actually already presented, but I just want to present again to really tie it together with what's going on right now. So we're going to kind of go through this one a little quicker, but I think it's an important economic indicator that we must pay attention to. So this is from CNBC. 32% of U.S. households missed their July housing payments. So this was published on, this is the July 8th article, updated July 9th. And it says, as the economic fallout from the coronavirus pandemic continues, almost 1/3 of U.S. households, 32%, have not made their full housing payments for July yet, according to a survey by Apartment List, an online rental platform. About 19% of Americans made no housing payment at all during the first week of the month, and 13% paid only a portion of their rent or mortgage. That's the 4th month in a row that a historically high number of households were unable to pay their housing bill on time and in full, up from 30% in June and 31% in May. Renters, low income, and younger households were most likely to miss their payments. So what you're seeing there, I mean, this is just staggering. You're talking about 1 in every 3 households being unable to make full housing payments, some being unable to make any payment whatsoever for the past 4 months. Now, right now we have something like an eviction moratorium going on, a federal eviction moratorium, and it's run out. I believe it ended in July, at the end of July. But Congress is talking about renewing that. Even the Republicans have proposed renewing that eviction moratorium. But for right now, okay. So for right now, there is sorry, lost the train of thought there. I apologize. I just saw a comment pop up that made me laugh, and so I apologize for that. But oh yeah, so right now there is no eviction moratorium. Sorry about that. So right now there's no eviction moratorium. Folks can, I think, legally be evicted right now. If Congress passes the next stimulus package, there should be an amendment in there that will, or a section of the bill that will renew the eviction moratorium so that people can't be evicted. But for right now, I think that that's expired and it's open season for landlords right now. And so, yeah, this is just staggering. You're talking about, again, just to highlight again, you're talking about 32% of people not making a full housing payment. 19% made no housing payment at all. That's almost 1 in every 5 households made. Sorry, am I? Okay, U.S. household. Okay, 19% of Americans made no housing payment at all, and 13% did only a part of it. So staggering numbers. What we're talking about is mass homelessness, being on the verge of mass homelessness in this country at a time when GDP is contracting and unemployment benefits, that $600 a week payment, is ending. So at a time when already 30%, 1 in every 3 households, were unable to make full rent payments, what our Congress has done is now condemn those people to falling off of a fiscal cliff now, and they're about to lose $2,400 a month in benefits for 30 million Americans. So this is going to only exacerbate this issue. That $2,400 a month my rent at my last place was over $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom. In what would be considered a safe neighborhood in the suburbs of Boston, sort of really inner suburbs of Boston, a place called West Roxbury. And that place was over $2,000 a month, which was, $25,000 a year. And so you're talking, for a lot of people, when you're talking 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, it's in that price range. You're talking about $1,500 to $2,500 a month for rent in and around where I live in Boston. And so for a lot of people, that's your ability to pay rent right there, or just to keep food on the table for a lot of people. So $2,400 at a time when already 30% of people are unable to make housing payments, and that was when 30 million Americans were already receiving an extra $2,400 a month. Now what's going to happen? Now what can we expect to happen here? So this is really troubling, I think. And just wanted to bring this back in and highlight that this is going on in the midst of all this other economic decline, and with that $600 a week federal pandemic unemployment compensation. Without that $600 a week extra benefits and unemployment insurance, you're talking about 30 million Americans who are going to struggle even more to make their rent payments. So this number is only going to increase for August, and then I think for September as well, because these things take a little while to show the impact of it. So we're gonna see some really troubling numbers up ahead on the housing front. And 2008 housing crisis, we're looking at another housing crisis of historic proportions. And just notice the common thread that you're seeing in everything that we've talked about today is historic. That word historic keeps on popping up. Historic. This is historic decline, historic economic decline. So I just really want to draw our attention to that and make sure that we are as concerned about this as we need to be, because this is a really concerning economic indicators here. All right, so just wanted to cover that one quickly. Let me pull up our next story here. Quickly check the comments here. Ben 2K says, "What do you mean?" No, don't. That was probably in reference to the tattooing. Ben 2K says, "My stream kind of lacks. I'm about 2 minutes behind." And Thanato says, "A real one means you're a genuine / true comrade. If that's what you're asking about with what do you mean?" Ben 2K says, "I sure am. Solidarity forever." I love it. I love seeing the solidarity in the comments here. This is, and Ben, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, he said this in a previous stream. Ben's from Germany, and so this is a global thing here. We're all joining together, and this is what solidarity looks like. It looks like, I'm going to assume that Ben is white. I'm sorry, Ben. It's just an assumption, because I assuming that most folks in Germany are. Yeah. But this is what solidarity looks like. We're solidarity across race, international borders, gender, just everything. We need solidarity across the board. This is how we build power, is by uniting globally with all working class people everywhere. We are, a working class person in the U.S. is every bit as important, and every person, every human life is important. A child in Yemen, somebody in Afghanistan, a worker in China, anywhere. We need working class solidarity across the board. So I love to see it. Ben 2K says my stream is Wi-Fi and not you. Sorry, I should have said that. What's happening with so many people on the street? Hasn't Senate left DC already? How's that shit legal? Yeah, exactly. Yep. The Senate left. They just took off. I think it's just for the weekend, but I think it could be long because these folks go on recess. They only work like 145 days out of the year in Congress, so they're actually only in session on 145 days of the year. I think working class people, it's like something like 200. It's almost double. Like they work about half of the days that an average working class person works, and they're these are the people that have all the power to affect this situation and change things and to make it better. And they've gone off and just took off in the middle of a crisis. So yeah, absolutely right. People are on the streets now. People are protesting. I need to get out there soon. I love protesting. I think it's, it's a cathartic experience, and also just, you build power that way and build solidarity that way. So if you can, get out there safely, try to social distance, wear your mask, but get out there and protest if you can. If there's a protest going on around you, look them up. Usually Facebook events will happen, but people are kind of a little sketchy about Facebook events, just the way they track things. So check it out, keep your ear to the ground. And if there are protests going on, support them in any way you can. We all have to get out there and support. I mean, you see these signs behind me. These signs right here are all signs that I make from when I'm out protesting and stuff. So I'm out there all the time. We're out there, me, Tammy, we're out there all the time. So we do it whenever we can to support these movements. And so you got to do whatever you can to support these movements. Ben 2K says, yeah, I'm hella white. I love it. Yo, Ben, I love it. Yes. And you still my brother. We brothers. Like that's just what it is. I'm assuming gender because the name, I apologize. That's probably not the best idea either. So, but we comrades. We are all comrades. That's real. So, all right, jumping to the next story here. So, this from the New York Times. After plummeting, the virus soars back in the Midwest. So what we are experiencing now is a resurgence of COVID-19. And I'd just like to read a little bit from this article just to, highlight what's going on. States like Missouri, Illinois, and Wisconsin are riding a frustrating seesaw during the pandemic, with new coronavirus cases rising again after apparent progress. So this is an August 1st article in the New York Times. And it says, first, the Pacific Northwest and the Northeast were hit hardest as the coronavirus tore through the nation. Then it surged across the South. Now the virus is again picking up dangerous speed in much of the Midwest, and in states from Mississippi to Florida to California that thought they had already seen the worst of it. As the United States rides what amounts to a second wave of cases, with daily new infections leveling off at an alarming higher mark, there is a deepening national sense that the progress made in fighting the pandemic is coming undone, and no patch of America is safe. In Missouri, Wisconsin, and Illinois, distressed government officials are retightening restrictions on residents and businesses and sounding warnings about a surge in coronavirus-related hospitalizations. In the South and the West, several states are reporting their highest levels of new coronavirus cases, with outbreaks overwhelming urban and rural areas alike. Across the country, communities including Snohomish County, Washington, Jackson, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, have seen coronavirus numbers fall and then shoot back up, not unlike the two ends of a seesaw. Okay. In Illinois, Governor Pritzker, this is a millionaire jackass who bought the election. I donated and supported the candidate that was running against him. I believe that was, okay, I'm blanking on who was running against him right now, but there was a Justice Democrat back candidate, I believe, running against him. But this, millionaire just bought the election, so screw him, but whatever. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker sounded an unusually somber note this past week as he delivered a warning that reverberated across the state. Even though Illinoisans had battled an early flood of coronavirus infections and then managed to reduce the virus's spread, Their successes were fleeting. As of Thursday, the state was averaging more than 1,400 cases a day, up from about 800 at the start of July. So here we are in the midst of all this, as folks like Stephen Mnuchin are out there saying that, oh, these $600 payments were only necessary during emergency. Well, here we have a clear resurgence of coronavirus cases in the US, who was already leading the charge on these. I mean, I think Brazil passed us recently, but like we are up there, top 5, easily, steady and just holding steady in there, top 3 probably really cases. We have the US has 5% of the world's population, but over 25% of the world's COVID-19 cases and deaths. So keep that in mind. We also do that with incarceration too. 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's incarcerated. So we're number 1. But this is important. This is important because it just shows that we're not out of this thing yet. And we already knew it was going to have a resurgence in the fall, but this resurgence right now is a resurgence due to a premature reopening. We all knew that the resources hadn't been provided to support this. Personal protective equipment was still lacking in many hospitals even, but across the board for, just folks that need it in general. And in a lot of states, hospital capacities were still very high. In Texas, they've gone beyond capacity, and the Texas State Board, I forget, their health board issued guidelines that for how to choose which patients they should send home with COVID-19 to go die at home. So that's where we are based on, age and health risk. We're now having to decide who dies because we don't have enough ventilators and hospital beds to care for all of these people, at least in Texas right now. So this is what we're facing. And again, with this resurgence is almost directly tied to this forced reopening, a premature reopening. Because why? People are desperate and they're begging to go back to work, not because they really want to go back to work because work is unsafe still, but because they are desperate to pay bills and they think work is the only way. And so people are rushing back to work when we're not ready for that, when we don't have the equipment in the virus and we don't have the treatment for COVID-19 yet. And so it's still dangerous and we're putting people's lives at risk. And we're talking about opening up schools when another study just recently came out that said that children actually spread coronavirus more efficiently than adults do. So maybe they're not dying from it necessarily, and children are dying from it. There have been cases of 5-year-olds. It was the youngest one I've heard of, but I know I'm sure there are even younger cases dying from COVID-19. So this idea that, this only harms older people, and so we as young people or millennials or whoever we are, we can go out there. I got people that were like thinking about taking trips to Florida in the midst of like Florida's like Florida at their worst, and people are like thinking about traveling from Massachusetts to Florida in the midst of that. Like people can be somewhat careless sometimes, and not thinking about what this means. Again, maybe we're safe, but maybe we spread it to somebody who's more susceptible to this or immunocompromised. And so we have to be thoughtful of not just ourselves but our community. Are we endangering our community by trying to go out to restaurants and take masks off? I was at I went to a Cheesecake Factory recently just to pick up a takeout order. And the way that they had this thing structured was like, I took a picture, there were like 40 people packed into this tiny area. They had people that were picking up deliveries, telling them to come into the building, and pick up their food. And that same area where you're picking up your food is where everybody has to funnel through to get, the people that are coming in to be seated. And I mean, people are just spaced one table separating them with their masks off. The whole restaurant, a huge restaurant, enclosed space full of people, masks off, and you're packed into the space just to pick up food. The old system, they were, dropping it off outside. You would just drive up your car, pull into a spot, and they would drive it out there. Small business I've seen with much better practices. I've seen small businesses like small pizza shops, local pizza shop. I went and like picked up a slice of pizza, and they told me like wait outside for the slice, and I was like, yes, absolutely, that sounds great and safe, and I'm cool with that. I didn't felt very nervous and afraid. I mean, I was like messaging my girlfriend like, this is crazy, like what are they doing, like it was making me anxious, so anxious, like being in this space with all these people. I had not been that close to that many people since this pandemic started, and it was just like, it was crazy making kind of stuff. And so I was just, if people are because of what they're being told by the government and the loosening of restrictions, people are feeling more comfortable going out in public, even without masks, or wearing their mask with like the nose uncovered. Those are the ones I just want to but yeah, so just try to be considerate, people. Wear masks if you can. Wear, whatever protective equipment you can. I wish I had some like gloves that fit me. I probably wear them to the stores and stuff, but like I can't even find like a pair of gloves, but like whatever. So all right, let's again, we just gotta kind of speed through because I'm really in a crunch time, so I'm gonna kind of keep pushing through, and I'll try to get to the comments at the end. Quick one from let's read a few more. Ben 2K says, I want Senate to work for minimum wage. Exactly. Maybe if I have a theory that we should tie the pay of the Congress to the minimum wage, make it a some percentage, whatever, tie it to the minimum wage, and I guarantee you those folks will be raising that minimum wage to raise their own pay. So I think that's a great idea, Ben, tying their pay to the minimum wage, or forget pay. The troubling thing about paying the minimum wage is that then they're more susceptible to corruption, because if they can't survive, then they're going to be more likely to be corrupted. So I do believe in like making sure they're being paid a living wage, but a minimum wage should be a living wage. So yeah, I agree. But I do think we could give them, like, say 2 times minimum wage or 4 times minimum wage, but tie it to the minimum wage. Another economist came up with another thing where you tie something else to the minimum wage. I don't know. I'll dig into that, but I think that's a good idea. Ben 2K says, they represent the people, then live like the people you represent. So damn true, man. These people are so out of touch. These Congress people are so out of touch with working class people. Thanatos says, LOL, then maybe then they'll raise the minimum wage. Exactly. Yep, absolutely. Ben 2K says that's the idea. Ben 2K says, yeah, you, and I mean Trump fucked up COVID real bad. You don't have a second wave. You fucked up so bad. You're still in the first one. Yeah, right? Like, it's like, there is no second wave. This is still the first wave, and it's just like, and this wave is like a damn tsunami here. You can look at a graph. I saw a graph of like the EU cases versus US cases, and it's wild. Like, so many deaths were preventable, but because of our lack of response to this thing, this underwhelming response to it, this is what we end up with. So all right, next story up. Give me 1 second to pull this up. All right, this one, I'm gonna try to pull this up. Only got about 10 minutes left here, folks. So we're going to try to get through this one pretty quickly. In fact, I'm probably going to have to show these. I'm going to show you some videos here. This is, okay, so let's, next story. All right. Okay. So for our next story, I would like to bring in my favorite economist, Richard Wolff, into the conversation. And just, Richard Wolff has some warnings for us. He'd like us to know what it is that we're facing. And so I'd like to bring him in here and just show a few clips of his and what he's warning us of, and trying to draw our attention to is the fact that we are already in the midst of a class war. And we have to be aware of that, because the folks in the upper class, they're aware of the class war. Folks that, the wealthiest, the 1%, they're aware of the class war. And so working class people have to build an awareness of the fact that we are already in the midst of a class war and know how we fight that war. So here's Richard Wolff. The first clip is going to be from him on the Tom Hartman program. Great show. Check it out on YouTube. Airs pretty much daily, I think, 5 days a week. And this is him talking to Tom Hartman. And we're just going to watch, again, a few clips of Richard Wolff, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Before we can talk about what has to come next, there has to be some kind of end to the make-believe, to the notion that we are in a place where fiddling around at the edges of our economic difficulties is adequate. I mean, that's what Republicans and Democrats alike have been doing. If you watch the debates these days, it is surrealistic. In the midst of a crash that is like the greatest depression of the 1930s, which was the greatest crash of capitalism until the one we're in now, you would imagine that you're on another planet. Really? In the depths of the Greatest Depression, you're going to reduce the amount of help you give to unemployed people when half their jobs are never coming back, as per your quotation, when the jobs that will be there will be under enormous pressure from the employer to cut wages, to cut benefits, to demand more time, a speedier process. The worst isn't the people who won't get a job. The worst is the people who will discover that the job they've had all along, or the one they're returning to, is going to be occurring in an economy that is geared up to take the most away from the mass of people as the way to get through it. Let me put it one other way. There is a phrase called class war. Americans are now going to have to understand that that's where we are, and that we are going into a period of time, whoever wins the presidency in November, of unparalleled historical conflict as we try to figure out who is going to have to give up what in order to reconstruct a functioning economy.
All right, so that's the first clip there. Pull up our next clip here. This second clip is a clip from a earlier appearance. This is from June, actually, and this was him on RJ Eskow's podcast. And so, again, he's just talking more about the class war that we're in, and he just digs a little bit deeper into this and tries to really explain why it's a class war and how to recognize it as a class war. So let's just check this clip out. I'm going to play it at 1.5 times speed. If it's going too slow, I might have to double it, so it might the speaking may be fast. I apologize for that. I'm just trying to get through it because we're on a time crunch. So here we go. Second clip, Richard Wolff.
When you throw 42 million people, and that's the official count, out of work over the last, let's say, 10 weeks, you are declaring, whether you intend it or not, really is irrelevant. You are declaring class war against the 160 million people in the United States labor force. And let me explain why. First of all, 42 million, that's more than a quarter of the labor force in this country. So however you quarrel about the details, we're talking at least a 25% level of unemployment. And that equals the worst level that unemployment reached in the Great Depression, namely in the year 1933. So we are at, and in all likelihood, likely to exceed that level of unemployment, which would qualify what we're going through as the worst crisis of capitalism in the history of the United States. It remains to be seen whether the capitalisms in other parts of the world follow suit. All right, here's what that means. For that 25%, 1/4, and let's be clear, if 1/4 of the workers of the country are out of work, there will be almost no family that isn't touched by this. Mother or father, but also son or daughter, or cousin or uncle or aunt or grandma. Someone's unemployed in virtually every family, in many more than one. Those people have diminished incomes. Those people have diminished self-esteem. Those people need to lean on, borrow from their fellow family members. It is therefore crunch time for all of them, one way or another, more or less. Then there's the uncertainty, which can be as destructive as anything else I've said. Here's the uncertainty. You don't know whether the job you lost because of the pandemic, will be there when you get ready to go back to work. Your employer doesn't know either. Many variables will determine it, but you certainly have to be uncertain and anxiety-ridden about whether you'll have a job to go back to, and that only makes your unemployment worse. But let me turn next to the 3/4 of the labor force, roughly 120 million Americans, who are still working, who have a job. When I said class war, I meant they are the victims or about to become the victims of that class war. And here's why. When you have massive unemployment, it acts economically like an invitation to every employer, large, medium, and small, to take advantage of the unemployment. to go to the workers you are still employing and say to them, look, John, look, Mary, I've been having a hard time. The pandemic has hurt our business, the economic crash even more so. I'm very sorry, but you're going to have to take a wage cut of 20%. You're going to have to lose your pension. You're going to have to take fewer holidays. You're going to have to come in a half hour early. You're going to have to stay a little bit longer. I'm going to have to cut your lunch hour. You get the picture. And the employer does this because he can. And why can he? Because there's 42 million unemployed people. If the existing worker doesn't accept reduced wages, reduced benefits, worse working conditions, or whatever, then there's 42 million people unemployed, having a harder time with each passing week as they use up their savings, they use up the toleration of the people they share households with, etc., desperate, who will take the job at the reduced wage and the reduced benefits. You're going to see that happening in the months and years again, across the board. That's why I call this a class war. It's a wholesale attack on the standard of living, the standard of consumption, the standard of work of the entire American working class. And in case...
Oh, right. So that's Richard Wolff there, dropping knowledge, y'all. And so you got to listen. When Richard Wolff speaks, I listen. You know, he's, you know, it's Cornel West, then like, you know, Cornel West, Noam Chomsky, Richard Wolff for me, pretty much. That dude is... He's been right about so much. He's been right about all of this when all of these other economists have been wrong for years and years and decades. I mean, this guy has been on point in his warned us of these things, and they just keep happening. He talks about the recessions, the what they call the business cycle, the economic downturns, and how in capitalism every 4 to 7 years, no matter where capitalism has existed anywhere in the world, every 4 to 7 years on average, they have an economic downturn, what they call the business cycle, or a recession, or a depression, or a retraction, a contraction. They have all kinds of cute names for it. Why? Because, you know, and he says it's happened so much they could come up with all these different names for it and try to, you know, essentially propagandize and just, you know, have you paying attention over there, or you know, and that's why the other thing that they'll do is name all these crises, like the 2008 housing crash. It's not called the 2008 housing, you know, it's called the 2008 housing crash. Or the Great Recession. It's not called like the Great Recession of capitalism. You know, they never mention the capitalism part of it, in the fact that it is directly tied to capitalism. So I really got to run, y'all. I'm almost up against it. I got a hard stop at 1:35 here. And so I only got 1 minute left to really go. So I'm just going to read a couple of quick comments. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this after the fact, please do me a favor. If you haven't already, if you're watching this now or after the fact, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you can afford it, please check out the description box below. You'll see a link to my Patreon account in there. It's patreon.com/radical democracy. And if you could please go there and just pledge a few dollars a month for me, whatever you can afford. I really appreciate it. It will help to grow this channel and help to build something. You know, what I intend to do is build a democratic workplace. My goal is to overthrow capitalism, one small socialist democratic workplace at a time. 50 years ago in Mondragon, a priest by the name of Arizmendi, he created a worker cooperative, a democratically operated workplace, and 50 years later now, that workplace that started with 5 people is now grown to over 100,000 people and is the 4th largest corporation in all of Spain. They're a democratic a cooperative of worker cooperatives, and all democratically owned and operated. And so check them out if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone for being here. I appreciate it so much. I really do. And I'll be back with you soon. I'm going to cut this up, try to chop this up into a bunch of clips. So if, you know, share these things. That's the other big thing you can do for me. If you can't subscribe, if you can't afford to subscribe to the Patreon, please do me a favor and just share the clip on social media, Twitter, Facebook, with anyone that you know that might be interested in ideas like this, and try to get, you know, ask them if they can subscribe and join up, and we're going to build this thing one person at a time. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I got to run, but I really appreciate you. Let me just read very fast. I'm just going to speed read through these comments, the last few. Ben2K says, thanks for the stream. I hope I can join the next one sooner. Have a great day with your girl. Aw, love from Germany. Aw, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate that. You have a great day too. You and everyone else. Solidarity forever. Ben2K says Nina Turner is great too. Oh, yes, she is. Love her. Yes, she is. I love me some Nina Turner. I love me some Nina Turner. So we'll bring in some Nina Turner. I loved what she did with Deborah Messing recently. Maybe we can chat about that soon. So yes, if you don't know Nina Turner, go check her out. She should have been the next VP and the next president. Oh, and Nina Turner follows me on Twitter, by the way. So that was one of the highlights of my life, really. And so yeah, I'm very proud of that. Nina Turner follows me on Twitter. So you should follow me too, all right? On to the 5th on Twitter. Check me out. I'll be back soon. Thank you so much for being here, folks. I really appreciate it. Love you all. Solidarity forever. Peace. All right, let's run.